It's a good day for Winnipeg Jets fans. The New York Rangers have actually defeated a team that was going to give them trouble, the Carolina Hurricanes. It took till Game 7, but thanks to the Rangers now advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals, Winnipeg is getting an upgraded second round pick moved to a first. We'll talk about what this means for the Jets and why getting this pick upgrade is super important, and also talk about the next round of playoffs and what we might expect about a potential Stanley Cup Finals matchup in just a few weeks. All coming right up on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
Or Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thank you for choosing to make Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. If you enjoy what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform of choice, including Apple, Spotify, Google, Megaphone, Odyssey, and YouTube. Doing so is completely free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But most of all, we just really love and appreciate your support. So thank you again for making us one of your most listened to and watched Winnipeg Jets podcasts out there. On tonight's episode, I thought it would be fun to talk about a very major development for the Jets. Obviously, thanks to the NHL playoffs, Winnipeg has actually had real stakes, which for a team that's not in the postseason, you would probably be a little bit surprised to hear. But pretty much every Jets fan that I know has become a temporary Rangers fan, or at least was until the end of yesterday, because the Rangers of course, had that major trade for Andrew Copp. They sent 2 second-round picks, but one of them had the opportunity to become a first-rounder if Copp had played, I believe, 50% of the games at least that he was assigned to New York, and also if the Rangers won 2 rounds of the playoffs, which, well, thanks to the Carolina Hurricanes kind of collapsing and Igor Shesterkin putting on a mad show, the Rangers are actually through to the Eastern Conference Finals, which for Winnipeg really couldn't be better news. Quite honestly, I think the Jets have needed a bit of a boost. The Barry Trotz uncertainty and the lack of, I would say, particular updates around the team. Other than that, things are just kind of in a bit of a holding pattern as the head coaching search continues. It has left Jets fans kind of needing something interesting. And it's not like the Jets are the only team that are a little bit quiet right now. Obviously, until we start getting closer to the draft, I think most teams, they're just kind of holding off and sort of waiting for the playoffs to resolve. Obviously, the more teams that get eliminated, the more that we're going to see, head coaching candidacies probably start to become available. In part because this league loves nothing more than to fire guys and then recycle them to another team. So obviously there are some new candidates that might be hitting the market. I don't think Carolina, after losing to New York, is going to be getting rid of Rod Brind'Amour. I think, if anything, the team itself is probably going to change. A couple of those guys are going to be free agents. Hey, maybe the Jets should take a look at Vincent Trocheck. I don't know. There are a few guys that Winnipeg might splash an offer on, but I think the main summation of the series was that, Carolina sort of had a couple of issues keeping up their momentum and creating offensive opportunities. Igor Shesterkin kind of snuffed out the rest that they did create. And every time they made mistakes, the Rangers were Johnny on the spot, hitting on counters and, creating really high danger chances that a lot of their backups really couldn't handle. Antti Adanta did a fabulous job throughout the series, but unfortunately he just came up a bit short, and Freddie Anderson wasn't able to come back in time in order to get the Canes back in the series. So that aside, obviously the most important thing for this one is that the Rangers, having traded for Andrew Copp, now we're getting a pick somewhere between 29 and 32, and this is good for the Jets. I think that second rounder was originally somewhere at like 60th overall, which, a second round pick up there, it's not bad, right? But you are talking about a pick that is towards the end of the second round, and obviously getting that upgraded to a really juiced first rounder at the end is somewhere around an 18% increase in likelihood that an NHL player emerges from your pick. Well, in particular, that your player or prospect actually plays 100 NHL games, which is not insignificant, right? An 18 to 20% jump is pretty huge. So Winnipeg has to be thrilled. There are some candidates for the Jets to draft towards the back of the first round. I'm going to hold off on talking about that particular pick until we start to get a better sense of where exactly it's going to fall. Just because I feel like the back end of the first round this year is going to be pretty crazy. But um, all the same, I will give you some candidates later this week talking about who might be draftable, which prospects towards the end of the first rounder are really worth a punt because once you're going to get to the back of the first and into the start of the second, the difference between picks becomes a little bit more marginal. But in this case, from where the Jets were before, obviously this is a massive jump. And yeah, all we could do is just be really happy. Now, some people might say, the Jets got the better end of the deal. And in some ways, yes. But I will say that, from my take, I think New York got so much more value out of Copp than I think people realized. Um, Andrew Copp is kind of a game changer. He's the kind of rental that you really dream of. A guy who dominates at even strength, a player who can be used on the PK, and I think the biggest thing with him uh, is that he shows that he is a top sixer. The Jets sort of underutilized him, and here he goes to the Rangers, immediately hits it off. He's had like 12 points in 14 games in the postseason, so I think Copp is both a huge success in a lot of ways, especially for the return that he got in the trade, but also organizationally a bit of a failure that Winnipeg was not able to keep him. Um, I just feel like with how the Jets treated him and how he was used in like a really third line role, oftentimes, sometimes even on the fourth. I just feel like the Jets really swung and missed on a guy who, quite frankly, was good enough to play somewhere on the first or second line and really could have been a pivotal role player. He was given opportunities to do that sometimes, but then after everyone would get healthy, he's back down the pecking order. So yeah, I do think Copp's going to get a huge raise. It's not going to be with Winnipeg, I'm pretty sure. I think that relationship is over, but, we wish him all the best. And we thank him for being awesome because now his team has advanced and we get an upgraded pick. So at the end of the day, Copp still gives us a really cool parting gift. And for that, Jets fans got to be thrilled. But of course, the Rangers actually have a very difficult next opponent. And, for the rest of this episode, I wanted to preview the two series because I think the conference finals this year are really compelling, very interesting. We don't actually have any real stakes now that the second rounder has already been promoted. So I wouldn't worry too much about putting any real stock in the results other than just your interest as a neutral. But we'll talk about what could be really cool about these series and maybe just maybe one of the eliminated teams might be looking for some coaching structure. I don't think any of these squads that are currently out there are going to be really making any hasty moves. But if something changes, maybe Trotz tries to go to one of these conference finalists. I'll talk about the odds that Trotz would actually maybe move to one of these teams towards the end of our series previews. But before we go any further, I just wanted to shout out one of our great sponsors at rockauto.com. For any of you who are vehicle owners or even interested in cars and trucks, you all know that there are so many makes and models out there, which when it comes to replacement parts, you also know that if you have to go to a brick and mortar retail store, 9 times out of 10, they probably won't have what you need. With so many models out there, keeping stuff in stock is always very difficult. So instead of wasting time and money, especially with how expensive gas is nowadays, just go to rockauto.com instead. As convenient as rockauto.com is, I think one of the best things is that you can save a ton of money. You might see a part for one van or truck for $300 to $350 at a retail store, but on rockauto.com, they sell that same exact part for around $200. I mean, you're talking about a $100 price difference. How wrong could you be? This is like the best option possible, and it's really convenient. But more than just saving money and time, rockauto.com is also a family-run business, serving DIYers just like yourself for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer, no matter your experience or walk of life. If you're really interested in giving them a shot, I highly recommend that you go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, locked on in the "How did you hear about us" box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com right now. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets. Thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. Like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to transition to talking about some NHL playoff series. Obviously, the second round has concluded, and we are on to the Eastern and Western Conference finals, which is really cool, super exciting. I think that we have some very interesting storylines this year. And the first series that I wanted to talk about is one that you know Jets fans, I think, were hoping for because it meant that the Rangers would advance to give us that promoted second round pick. But after going through a couple of teams that were icing some backup goalies, the Rangers now face their toughest test yet, which is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, I will say one particular thing that I've seen with all of these backup goalie comments. Everyone's like, "Oh, now they're shooting against Andrei Vasilevsky. Surely they can't repeat the same success that they've had before." And I feel like it sort of ignores the fact that the Rangers were actually a pretty high-scoring team during the regular season. Um, a 7-game playoff series against the same team is obviously a very different story than going through the regular season, but I just feel like the stuff that worked for New York during the regular season is probably going to be the same stuff that they have to do here. Uh, I think they have one particular advantage, and it's that they've been very good at attacking the slot and being super efficient, right? This team is not a squad that creates a lot of volume chances, but if you want to make the most of your opportunities, get into those extremely high danger areas, make the most of it. And that's kind of how the Rangers have lived during a lot of these series. Um, Again, this is not a team that tends to outcreate or outshoot their opponents in terms of scoring chances and the volume of those chances, but instead they trade quantity for quality, which I think is a big thing, especially with how the Rangers do play. Oftentimes, they have to rely very much on sort of blocking shots and creating breakouts off of forced turnovers because they spend a lot of time in their defensive zone. That often does lead to Igor Shesterkin being put through the ringer, to be honest. But this style is what works for them. They've had some pretty decent success, and look, they've gotten farther than I think anyone pegged them for. Regardless of what happens at the end of the series, I think that their playoff run really has to be looked at with a very positive light. And I think the moves that New York made were very aggressive. Some of them were a little strange, but for the most part, I think if you're a Rangers fan, you have to be happy. And for Jets fans, obviously, quite a few ex-Winnipeg players now going on to have great success. Everyone seems to hate Jacob Trouba now, which is really funny. I will say that he has a bit of a mean streak that I don't recall being as aggressive as he was when he was with the Jets. He did have edgy hits for us, and sometimes he did get suspended. But with the Rangers, he just seems even edgier, even harder edged. Uh, a lot of very rough hits, and some pretty nasty injuries coming out of them. So, yeah, the Rangers I think are probably like bizarro Jets in a way, leaning heavily on their goaltender and elite finishing. Their opponents are a very battle tested group looking for a third Stanley Cup. Um, this edition of the Lightning is the worst that we've seen in several seasons, but I don't know that that always matters with them because they have such a really good scoring core that even when they're not creating a lot of chances, their ability to still hit you on the power play and at even strength, even without guys like Braden Point, I just don't know how you're supposed to contain them forever. And even if you do, even if you outplay them, then you have to score against Vasilevsky, and that's been really difficult for most of their opponents. For the Rangers, I think that this could be a really tight series. You've got Shesterkin versus Vasilevsky, which these guys have been among the top performers in the regular season and the postseason this year. Had Jake Ottinger not happened, I think Shesterkin would probably be number two. Even Vasilevsky, I don't know if he qualifies as number one or number two on this list. Uh, but yeah, I mean, you've got the guy who I would pick for the Hart Trophy and the Vezina, and you've got another guy who's won multiple Vezinas, I'm pretty sure. I think Vasi has like two or something. But either way, yeah, very compelling series. I think it's going to make for great theater. I think Tampa Bay emerges in 6 or 7, but I would not be shocked at all if the Rangers find a way through. and they'll also start off the series with home advantage, which I feel like it's a little bit overrated at times. But that crowd atmosphere at the Garden was great, and maybe this is the exact kind of boost that they need heading into a series against a really veteran squad with a lot of experience in the postseason. Uh, no matter how much I think the Lightning are going to slow down, they just never really seem to tire out. And even when they're having their backs against the wall, they've always found ways to come through. So yeah, I think you've got two very interesting teams. This will make for a very fun series, one that probably no one really expected. But hey, that's always the narrative that the playoffs, right, is something crazy and unexpected. But I don't know if anything is more unexpected as the Western Conference Final, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets. We are talking about the playoffs and the conference finals. We've just covered the Eastern Conference Finals. Now we want to talk about the Western Conference Finals because, um, as you know, this is going to be a pretty crazy year for the postseason. A lot of these Stanley Cup favorites have already been knocked out. We've had some very big upsets, but I don't know if any team has really defied the odds more than the Edmonton Oilers. As much as the Rangers kind of had to lean on Igor Shesterkin and some elite finishing to get through, the Oilers have had even less to stand on. It's basically just McDavid and Draisaitl. And I really feel like McDavid has done um, a Conn Smythe performance on the level that we really haven't seen in ages. It comes to be that hockey tends to be a weak link sport in that it's not really about your superstar players. It's more about the collective whole, right? Uh, I think that there's some, middle ground in there. Obviously, teams like Tampa Bay and Colorado certainly have insane depth, and you could argue that they have multiple superstars on their team. But McDavid has been so good as to almost challenge that notion to a degree. I think Edmonton has been not particularly great. They've had a couple of games where they've really outplayed their opponents. I think Calgary they outplayed on a number of occasions. Certainly the Kings they dominated at times, but on the whole of it, I mean, they're not really that impressive when you think about it. And I think it's really down to McDavid just being insane. He's had one of the craziest playoffs I've ever seen, which is funny to say because we're saying that about goaltenders too. But McDavid's ability to carry the play, to dominate possession, to create so many goal scoring opportunities, and actually convert on them, it's crazy. I mean, I've never really seen somebody single handedly drag his team through a postseason run the way that McDavid has, especially not in a goalie mask. I think that is very surprising. If you're making saves, it's one thing, but McDavid basically has to do all of this work, including transition, uh, passing, distribution, space creation. And it's not to say that what Vasilevsky, Ottinger, Shesterkin, etc. have been doing aren't very impressive in their own right. I just feel like McDavid has basically carried the Oilers. It's not like they have Smith to really lean on in the direst of times. Mike has been decent this postseason, but do you really want to put all your eggs in his basket? I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. So yeah, McDavid, this has probably been his maybe his best run ever in a single part of a season streak. I mean, it's just unreal. Also, I would say Evander Kane has been a punishing finisher. He's been really lethal, and his shooting percentage has to be something crazy right now. It does mean that he'll get an extension somewhere, and I feel like a lot of people are trying to sports wash a lot of the things that he's done and been accused of because he's having such a good postseason. And I want to say, I think it's important that we don't just make redemptive arcs for people. You don't have to believe somebody's guilty, but I will say that if you don't believe they're guilty, then also don't assume that they're innocent and say, oh, well, second chances and all that. I think, with the Jets fan base, everyone seems to hate Evander, so it's not really that hard to um, follow this perception that, you need to be aware of their accusations and treat them with respect. But, elsewhere, I've seen a lot of media outlets like praising Kane for this battle from the bottom kind of story, and I just don't really like that, to be honest. But he'll make a crap ton of money, I'm sure, on his next deal. If anything, I'm sure the Oilers want to bring him back for some crazy contract, and I'm pretty sure that's going to age terribly almost as soon as it happens. But the Oilers are the Oilers; they've always done weird things. and I wouldn't be surprised if Ken Holland has one more bad decision lined right up. Now, I've talked a lot about the Oilers. The Avalanche, I mean, there's not really a lot to say here. They just have to win. I think that has been one of the most simple and yet difficult ways to describe their issue is that they've just struggled to advance through playoff rounds. Um, in previous and having sustained zone pressure by teams like Vegas, they collapsed. This year, they don't really have that as much. And I think that their improvements on the back end, as well as their continued maturation of the offense and their star young defenders, just makes them honestly almost unstoppable. This is going to be a really tough battle for them because I think against the Oilers, if you're going to be matched up against McDavid for like 30 minutes a night, which he will play 30 minutes, um, yeah, McKinnon is going to have to pull double duty. As good as McKinnon is, and certainly he has some incredible line mates too, he's just not on the level of McDavid, which is crazy to say because McKinnon at times has outperformed McDavid in previous seasons. But this year, man, I don't know. Connor's just on a different level, and I think the way that he's playing, uh, they're really going to have to exploit those depth matchups. And if their depth lines can't outscore Edmonton's, that's going to be a problem. Darcy Kemper and net should be pretty decent. I don't know who their other backup is. It might be Pavel Francouz or something, but yeah, I think that's probably the main issue that they're concerned about because Kemper hasn't been ideal, and I do think he's actually injured or something. So, yeah, this is going to be a tough battle. I will say that. I think it's going to come down to special teams and discipline. Both of these teams have ridiculous power plays. I think Colorado probably has the more capable penalty kill, but I don't think either wants to be in that situation, especially against these amazing shooters. So, yeah, I think Colorado just wants to advance. That's basically it. That's the last thing that they have to do because they've kind of improved their team to the point of not really having many other options before you start running into diminishing returns. So just get her done. That's basically it. I'd be curious to know what you think about these teams and these matchups. If, say Colorado or the Lightning stumble, should somebody get fired? Should a coach like Barry Trotz be considered for either of these teams? My personal take is no. I don't think Trotz actually improves any of these teams. And look, I like Barry, but I think he does have some very specific limitations, and that's kind of why if he doesn't get signed by the Jets, I'm not going to be devastated. I will be disappointed, but I'm not going to be super upset. And I don't think that any of these teams, or even some of the teams in the previous rounds, should really try hiring him. I think there's this mistaken perception that you hire a coach with Stanley Cup winning pedigree and suddenly all of your issues are going to resolve. With Trotz, I think he wasn't really the driving force of why the Caps won. And so, as good of a coach as he is, and he is still like a top 10 coach for me, again, I think it's just hard to imagine him doing a better job than guys like Brind'Amour, Bednar, the guys who are currently leading their teams, at least through the second round and beyond. So, I think the Jets would be very much a team that makes a lot of sense for Barry, but we're still kind of waiting for those decisions to shake out, and we'll have the announcement as soon as it hits where Trotz is going to be heading, and hopefully it is to Winnipeg. But until then, let me know what you think. Maybe you think Trotz could actually improve some of these playoff teams. Give me your thoughts at HLivingLoco and LO_Winnipeg Jets on Twitter and in the YouTube comments below. But for tonight's episode, that is going to be all the time that we have. We'll have more playoff coverage and any additional free agent and draft prospect talk throughout the rest of the week. So stay tuned for that. And thanks again for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. While you're at it, make Locked On NHL your second listen. From first-round matchups to each Stanley Cup kiss, Locked On NHL covers the playoffs like no other. Hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday. It's free and available wherever you get your favorite podcasts, so be sure to like, follow, and subscribe right now. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Have a great night, and go Jets go.